Hi, I'm Julie Powell and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. This time I'm going to run through Alice in a Box. So this is the finished artwork. I'm going to go through how I did this step by step. There's a few fairly simple techniques that I use to pull it all together. So I'm just going to run through them all. Now this is a background that was from an Kupuli, I hope I pronounced that right, set from Mischief Circus. I love her stuff, it's just phenomenal, great for doing collages and various other bits and pieces. So I used that background. That's pretty much as it is at come. I didn't change anything. There was a table here that I got, I think it was also from Mischief Circus, of which I then anchored with a shadow underneath. You can just see that there. So I brought Alice in. Now I had already put Alice in the box in a separate file, but I'll just briefly show you the photos that I used. They were shot separately, so there's a shot of the box which is on a different table, and there is a shot of Jess, who is playing my Alice. So I extracted her, put her in the box. I think I even ended up having to do a bit of puppet warp on her arm just to move her arm so that it was level. So that just put her in the box, and then I dragged them both in to here. Then of course I added a little bit of shadow just to anchor the box to the table, and I then merged all that together onto a new layer and took that into Topaz Impressions. Now this is a painted layer. I believe it's probably Cezanne, maybe. But if you go into Topaz Impressions, there's lots of different painterly effects you can use. You can go obscure, you can go to impressionists. There's Van Gogh, Reno, Cezanne, so many, Degas. You can do Da Vinci Sketch. So I use Topaz quite a bit. There is a whole raft of different programs that you can get with Topaz, but impressions and adjusters too that I use predominantly. So like I said, there's all sorts of different ones you can go through here. Go to painting, and like I said, it's might be Degas that I used. Yeah, I think it is actually. So there you go. So you just go in there, you can go in, of course you can make all the changes that you want, varying different brush sizes, you can colour stroke variation, you can do all sorts of things to change the brush, smudge, all sorts of things. So you can do all that in there. So I'll just cancel and get out. Okay, so I'll just put that back. Now that just gives a nice painterly effect on it, but it's probably a bit much than what I want. So just go to overlay and drop that down to about 25%. So it still gives a slight painterly effect to it, but just deepens the colour and gives it a gorgeous saturation. Now if I went into my curves layer, and I didn't change anything on the RGB or the colours. All that I did here is multiply and dropped it down to 45%. At 100% it's way too dark, but at 45 it intensifies the colours and the hues. I then did a curves layer to do a dodge and burn basically. So I brought the shadows down and then put a layer mask on and inverted it. That's with the layer mask turned off, and with the layer mask turned back on, and then I painted back in where I wanted the shadows. So I deepened all the shadows by going through and painting them back in. I then did the reverse of that, and I lightened everything slightly, put a layer mask on, inverted that, and then painted everything back in for the highlight. So again, if I turn that off, you can see where it's brightened all the way through. I then added a texture layer. This is one that I use all the time, which is this one here. I dropped that down to soft light and dropped it to 62% and then masked out the model because I didn't want so much texture all over her features as well. I then merged just to save a copy, and I took this then into Nick and went into Color Pro. Now I actually have quite a few presets that I use a lot. So there's a lot of presets here. Some of these I have made, some I haven't. One that I tend to use on this one is one called Superwoman, which was, I've created this and used it quite a few times. As you can see, it really softens everything up but punches up the colours quite dramatically. So that's Superwoman, and I dropped it down to about 68% because it was just a bit harsh. If I had that up to 100%, it's oversaturated and it just looks a bit fake. So I dropped it down. So then I merged it all again. I had a color balance, which I went in and adjusted everything in the magentas and yellows, basically in the mid-tones. In the highlights I put a bit more blue just to round it out, and in the shadows I just went through and put a bit more magenta and blue into the shadows. So then I did a hue saturation. It was all getting quite ridiculous in the colours by this stage, so I did drop that down about 25 points just to soften the colours out, because it was yeah, just getting a bit much. I then went back into the color lookup table, which of course is in your adjustment panel. So color lookup, this time I did Foggy Night, which I dropped down to 62%. At 100% it was just way too dark, although that is kind of cool. I could have left it there and brightened it up other ways. And then Edgy Amber, which is another one that I use a lot, great for warming things up, gives a really interesting tonal range to the whole piece. Then did another curves layer, brightened it up a little bit, dropped the whites down so that they weren't quite so stark, and with the shadows I brought them up a bit so that they were a little bit hazy, not quite as sharp and crisp. I really love doing that whole hazy final layers to my images, gives it sort of a surreal edge. Then went in and dropped the contrast down a little bit and did a brightness layer. Added my logo. So that one's done. So thank you again for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.